Is this a creepy story? Yes, it is. A scary story? Well, that is up to you. I always thought I was born for this. Death never scared me, not like it scared others. Maybe that's why I studied to become a mortician. I thought it would be quiet, predictable, clinical. But I was wrong. My name is Eliza. I graduated last spring, top of my class in mortuary sciences. When I got the call for a full-time position at Hollow Pines Funeral Home, I was thrilled. Small town, old building, perfect start. The owner, Mr. Redman, was kind but quiet. He showed me the prep room, the chemicals, the drawers where the bodies were kept. He said I'd be starting that evening, alone. "It's slow," he said. "You'll be fine." I wasn't fine. My first shift started just after 7 p.m. The sky was purple, the kind of sky that makes you feel small. I parked under a flickering streetlight that buzzed louder than it should. Inside, Hollow Pines was colder than expected. Not just from the AC. The whole place felt still. Like a museum no one visited anymore. Mr. Redman was already halfway out the door. "Everything's prepped," he said. "You've got one tonight. Cardiac arrest. He's clean." I asked if there was anything else I needed to know. He paused, hand still on the doorknob, then said, "Don't overthink the quiet. That's how they get in." And with that, he left. I wasn't sure what that meant. A joke, I told myself. Funeral home humor. Still. The door clicked shut louder than it should have. The prep room. Cold fluorescent light. A man in his 50s lies on a steel table, covered with a white sheet up to his chest. He was in his 50s. No autopsy, just preservation, clean work. As I cleaned and began the arterial embalming, I felt calm, focused. My professors always said the dead weren't the scary ones. It was the living you had to watch out for. His face was peaceful, like he went easy. By 9:30, I was halfway through the work. So I took a break. The break room was barely a room. A chipped table, microwave from 1997. But I didn't mind. I unwrapped my sandwich, popped in my earbuds, and queued up a playlist. Old folk rock, something to take the edge off. That's when I thought I heard it. A knock, somewhere near the prep room. I paused the music. Nothing. Then again, a sound, like a voice, behind the wall, muffled, garbled, wet. I stood up, took the earbuds out, held my breath. Nothing. Just the hum of the cooler and my own heartbeat in my ears. I laughed, told myself I was just on edge, first shift nerves. But I didn't finish the sandwich, and I didn't turn the music back on. The hallway back to the prep room felt longer now. It hadn't changed, but something had. The silence was thicker. The fluorescent lights buzzed louder than before, or maybe I was just noticing it now. I opened the prep room door. Everything was where I left it. Almost. He hadn't moved, obviously. But his mouth, it was just slightly open. It had been shut before, I remember clearly. Tight, peaceful. Now it hung just a little, just enough to be wrong. A small detail, a muscle twitch maybe. But then I looked at my tray. One of the tools, my fine blade scissors, wasn't where I left it. I don't misplace things, not when I work, especially not with sharp objects and open veins. I scanned the floor, checked the edge of the sink, nothing. Then I noticed the scissors were across the room, on a rolling cart I hadn't used, sitting there, like someone had gently placed them down, out of reach. I stood there for a long moment, not moving, just listening, waiting for something to explain it. Nothing did. I walked over, slowly, and picked up the scissors. The metal was cold, colder than everything else in the room, and when I turned back toward the table, his mouth was closed again. It was nothing. Had to be. First shift, sleep deprivation, stress. But I double-checked every lock, every tray, every drawer that night, and I didn't eat again that night. My second night started the same way. The drive, the silence, the buzz of that same broken light above the parking lot. But something felt different, like the building had been waiting for me, or worse, expecting me. I unlocked the front door. The air inside was cold, sharper than the night before. Not from the AC. I checked. It was off. Tonight's client was a woman named Eliza Wren, 28, found in a lake up north. No foul play, just slipped under. Drowning victims are delicate. The skin, the eyes. You have to treat them like they could still feel everything. I covered her with a sheet and wheeled her gently into the prep room. The moment the wheels crossed the threshold, the lights flickered. Just once, but long enough for the room to go completely black. And when they came back on, her arm was hanging out from under the sheet. I hadn't left it that way. I tried to focus. Eyeshadow, foundation, a light blush to bring warmth back to the cheeks. I spoke softly as I worked. Some morticians do that. They say it keeps the silence from growing teeth. But the silence tonight already had them. I was brushing Isla's cheekbone when I saw it in the mirror. Not her, another woman, standing directly behind me, still, pale, hair soaked, head tilted like a curious bird. I turned around, fast. Nothing, just the room, the tools, the prep table, the hum of the refrigerator. But my brush was gone. I looked everywhere, under the table, behind the tray. Then I saw it. The missing brush, the one I was just using, was now resting on Isla's chest, like someone had placed it there, gently. I stared at it, and that's when I heard it. I liked that one. Soft, whispered, female, right next to my ear. I spun around again, nothing, but Isla's eyes were open. I ran to her file, flipped through the intake notes. There it was, her sister's handwriting. Please make her beautiful. She always loved getting her makeup done, especially with that flat-tipped brush. It was her favorite. My hands were cold. The brush had been in her chest pocket. No way she could have known. No way I could have known. Unless... The rest of the night moved like honey, slow, thick, quiet, but too quiet. I finished the makeup, closed her eyes again, wheeled her back into the cooler, but I felt it, that something was still in the room. Not evil, but not gone, as if I'd opened a door and it hadn't shut all the way. I turned out the lights, locked up, drove home, didn't sleep, because the last thing I saw was that mirror. And in the mirror, she was still watching. My third night was different. There was no knock on the delivery door, no call from the hospital, no new paperwork, no client, just me and the quiet. Mr. Redmond called around 6, said there wouldn't be any bodies tonight. Just keep an eye on things, he said. Make sure nothing leaks and nothing shifts. I didn't ask what he meant by that. It felt weird, walking into the prep room and not seeing someone waiting for me. The lights weren't as harsh tonight. The air smelled less like chemicals, less like death. I took my sandwich and thermos and sat down in the break area just outside the prep bay. I even played music this time. Soft jazz, something from a playlist I hadn't touched in months. It filled the space like warm air, instead of the cold, tight silence I'd grown used to. I looked around while I ate. Everything was clean, still, in its place. No missing brushes, no opened mouths, no phantom reflections. The mirror even, it reflected just what it should. I let myself relax, chewed slowly, listened to the brass horns fill the air. For the first time, Hollow Pines felt peaceful. I started to wonder, was it just the clients? Was that what stirred the air here? The ones with unfinished thoughts, lingering attachments, maybe even regrets. Maybe without one of them here tonight, there was nothing to press in, no weight, no eyes from beyond the cooler doors. It made me wonder how many people had been left here quietly, holding on to the last thing they had. But then the music crackled, just for a second. A little burst of static, barely there, then back to normal. I froze, waited, listened. But the room didn't change, nothing moved, no whisper, no knock, just music. Just the soft thrum of an old building, breathing. By the end of the shift, I was calmer than I'd been in days. Still, I walked past the coolers a little faster, checked every lock twice, and turned the mirror around to face the wall, just in case. Driving home, I started to ask myself, was tonight quiet because the dead weren't here, or because they were all around me and just didn't need anything this time? Night 4, another quiet one. No call, no client, no new name on the clipboard by the cooler. Mr. Redmond didn't even check in tonight, just left a note by the office phone. Nothing scheduled, keep an eye out. It was starting to feel routine. That alone should have scared me. I ate my sandwich, drank my coffee, listened to the same old jazz playlist. It was peaceful, almost normal. For a moment, I let myself feel confident. Maybe all the strange stuff was just nerves, or coincidence, or grief, leaking into places it didn't belong. But boredom is dangerous. It makes you curious, and curious people start to explore. The office was warm, a little dusty. Redmond didn't use it much, just to sign forms and drink tea from a cracked mug. But there was a drawer in the desk, bottom left, old, with a bent brass handle. I pulled it open. Inside, under a stack of death certificates and invoices, was a leather-bound journal. Heavy, faded, no title. Just an impression in the cover where hands had gripped it for years. It was a log. A running thread of thoughts, observations, warnings. Each entry signed by someone who had worked here, morticians, apprentices, owners. Entries dated all the way back to 1979. At first, it read like a mix of therapy and tradition. Client this evening was light, 45 years old, peaceful. Sometimes I swear they're still breathing. Mirror in the prep room won't stay covered. The deeper I went, the more the entries changed. The handwriting got shaky, the stories darker. Don't answer knocks after 2:55 a.m. They like the ones who talk to them. Always close their mouths, always. Then one entry stopped me. The handwriting was jagged, letters pressed too hard like the pen nearly tore the page. Calm nights are the worst. They lure you in. Don't let your guard down. 2 quiet nights is a pattern. The third one is when it gets bad. Really bad. And if you've already seen things, they've seen you too. There was a space after the entry, then a final line. Third calm night. I won't be here for it. No name, no date, just that. I hadn't realized I'd been holding my breath. I closed the journal carefully and put it back. 2 peaceful nights, that's what I'd had. And tomorrow would be the third. I didn't know what that meant, not exactly, but I felt it, deep in my chest. Tomorrow would not be quiet, not anymore. I pulled into the lot at 6:53 p.m. The sky was darker than it should have been. Heavy clouds, no moon, like something above was waiting. I unlocked the door. On the counter sat a yellow sticky note from Mr. Redman. Do not overthink the quiet. No greeting, no sign-off, just those words. At midnight, the call came. Triple homicide, domestic, a father, mother, and their young son. Redman hadn't said a word about it earlier. No heads up, no paperwork in advance. But the delivery team arrived like clockwork. They were quiet. Too quiet. Didn't even look me in the eye. Just signed the logbook and disappeared into the dark. I started with the father. His chest had 3 entry wounds. Still dried blood under the nails, signs of a struggle. As I began the prep, I heard it. A rustle behind me. I turned. The mother's sheet had slipped or been pulled. Her mouth was open. I closed it gently, carefully. Pressed her lips together, trying not to shake. I moved back to the father. His mouth was now open too. I caught my own reflection, but I wasn't alone in it. The boy, his body still untouched, was standing in the mirror, not lying down, not still, standing, watching me. I dropped the brush in my hand. It clattered to the floor and snapped me out of it. I turned around. His body was still on the table, still, small, cold. But the mirror didn't lie, not tonight. I needed a break, not for food, just distance. I sat in the break room and shoved in my earbuds. Jazz again, something smooth, mindless. I stared at the floor, breathed, tried to will the air to lighten, but it didn't. It was like sitting inside a pressure chamber. Then, Crash! So loud it shook the walls. Even through the music, I tore out the earbuds. The sound continued. Metal clattering, glass shattering, things being thrown, dragged. The prep room. I should have called someone, should have left, but some part of me knew if I didn't go back in, I'd regret it. I opened the door. Everything was on the floor, not smashed, placed in circles, perfect circles, drawn in powder and metal and bone, one around the father, one around the mother, one around the child. Objects placed deliberately. Scalpels, cotton rolls, thread spools, clamps, all laid in symmetrical patterns. It was ritualistic, deliberate, and none of it had been like this 15 minutes ago. I hadn't made them. I hadn't even seen the supplies move. But there they were, like they'd been summoned or built by someone else. I didn't scream, couldn't. I just stood there, while the air pressed in, while the silence waited, and in the mirror behind me, all three of them were sitting up, watching me, waiting.
I tried to make sense of it, tried to ask the only questions that mattered. How is this happening? Why me? What do they want? Every time the thought formed, something shifted. The father's head turned slightly. The mother's hand slipped an inch over the side of the table. The child's mouth stretched open again, wider than before. Each time my mind raced, the room responded. I looked at the mirror. They were closer. Another glance. Closer still. The circles didn't protect me. They weren't cages. They were doors. And I had already opened mine. I knew I had to leave. I turned to run, and there, in the window's reflection, they were right behind me, no longer lying down, not watching from mirrors, standing. The boy tilted his head, just like in the journal's entry. I squeezed my eyes shut, and everything exploded. I couldn't open my eyes. I wanted to, I tried, but they wouldn't. Air rushed around me, cold and fast, like being inside a tornado of grief and rage. Clamps snapped past my head. Embalming fluid bottles shattered like glass rain. The room screamed. Then a touch. Warm, human, real. A hand resting gently on my shoulder. Then a shake and a voice. Eliza. I opened my eyes. Everything was still. The room was a wreck, but the bodies were back on the tables, unmoving. He nodded once, like it had happened before, like it would happen again. I told you not to mind the quiet. Don't think about it. The how, the why, the rules. The more you do, the louder they get. The louder they get, the more real they become. I didn't speak. I couldn't. But in his words, I understood. The next night I returned. No screaming, no shadows, no mirrors. Just me and one new client. Middle-aged, stroke, nothing unusual. As I worked, a tray behind me shifted, slipped just enough to teeter. I caught it before it fell, set it back into place, didn't look around, didn't ask why, didn't think. Eliza standing still in the quiet room, staring down at her work. A faint smile, not joy, but calm, control, acceptance. Sometimes silence is just silence. But here, you don't ask, you don't wonder, you don't let them in. Some places aren't haunted by ghosts. They're haunted
by attention, by thoughts, by eyes that linger too long. So if you ever find yourself in a place like hollow pines, don't ask questions, don't look too long, and whatever you don't think about it. If you enjoyed tonight's tale, leave a like and subscribe to Campfire Horror Stories for more chilling tales just like this one. New stories drop every week, just in time for the lights to go out. Sleep tight and don't watch the mirrors.